What's up, guys? Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about 5 different ways that you can retouch photos by removing blemishes or objects on your face. It's going to be fun. Hope you guys learned something. Let's get right into it. So one of the first and easiest ways you'll find to remove blemishes from a photo, for example, is this picture of me that I took, or that someone in my photo class took recently. We're going to go over to our toolbar over here, and I'm going to make my screen wider so that it's easier to see everything we got going on here. And as you can see up here, we have these little red blemishes on the skin and some moles and stuff that just kind of don't look very nice in this professional studio lighting setup. So there's a couple ways we're going to go over in this tutorial. So one of the first ones, we're going to head over to this toolbar on our left here, and we're just going to click on this one that looks like a band-aid with a little circle around it. It's called the Spot Healing Brush tool. We're going to click it. And I'm on a Mac trackpad, so I can zoom in just by pinching. But if you guys are trying to zoom in, you can press Command plus, or you can go to the little eyeglass right here. So if I were to press Command plus, I'd zoom in. And then if you press H, you can then drag your screen. And then you could click back onto the tool you want to use after you've gotten to where you need to be. So I'm back on my Spot Healing Brush tool on the left side here. And this is one of the easiest and most fun tools to use in Photoshop because it's so effective. The first thing you got to do is make sure you have the proper size. So you're going to look at this little circle that is your cursor, and you kind of just click and it does its best to remove. Sometimes it looks a little wonky, so sometimes it's better to hold and drag to remove some of the blemishes. But if for some reason you need to do a bigger area, like I can't get both of these moles in one click, the best way to increase the brush size, you could go to the top left here, click this little caret, and increase the size by dragging this. But I like doing it pixel by pixel, so what I do is I just click the brackets on my keyboard. The close bracket will start increasing the size of your cursor, and the opening bracket will decrease the size. So now that I'm the right size for these 2 moles, I'll just click on it, and they'll disappear. So that's a pretty simple way to remove with that tool, and that's the first one we're going to go over. And I'm going to undo those blemishes just so I can use the other tools we'll go over to help with this, so that we don't run out of blemishes on my face. As much as the point is to get rid of them, it's going to not help us for teaching other ways. So the next tool we're going to go over is still on the toolbar over here. And the clone stamp tool is it's kind of what it is, which is a stamp, and you can replicate any part of your image. Usually you'll click, if you were to just click, it won't allow you, because this is a bit more manual of a tool than the Spot Healing Brush. So if you're not as experienced in photo editing, I'd recommend the Spot Healing Brush as your first choice. But for people who want to get pretty specific on what's getting put where with blemish removal, this is a pretty good choice. So the way it works is you're going to hold down your Alt key, your ALT key, but on Mac it's going to be your Option key. So you hold that down and your cursor is going to turn into this little plus with a circle, and then you will click anywhere you want, any direction you want. I'm going to click right here, or actually probably here. And once you've clicked, you can then let go of the Alt key, and then wherever your cursor goes, it's gonna match that one point that you had. And then once you click and drag, where that little plus is where you put your Alt key selection. And when you drag it around, it's basically just copying the area right there, and it's a pretty harsh tool. It's not very soft. You can adjust the brush to be more or less hard. But it's a pretty rigid tool. So like I'd go over here and I click Alt and just click. So it's kind of like a longer version of the Spot Healing, but it is very effective. But anyway, that's all for the clone stamp tool. It's a little bit more specific and a little bit more manual than the Spot Healing Brush, but it's still definitely a very good tool. So for our next tool, we're going to be using our patch tool. If you go to the left here, you kind of look at the one that looks like a rectangle with little lines in it. You click that one. And this one is one of the only ones that utilize the select feature in Photoshop. If you guys have used the lasso tool before, it's a very similar version of that. So what you're going to do is kind of draw a line around what you want to get rid of. So you're going to draw a circle, and then it's going to have these little things that have been described to me as marching ants. And what we're going to do is click in the center of our little marching ants area and hold, and we're going to drag to the side, and then we're just going to let go. And this is one of my favorite ways to remove blemishes, and that's because of how good the patch tool is at blending whatever section you take with what is currently around it, because it just does such a good job at blending the tones, the colors, the lighting with where you pulled to connect it to where you were. It's just a very good tool that I would recommend to anyone trying to move large areas. Alright, so I just undoed all the tools we just used and all the ways we just removed. And I think what we're going to get into brush tool. So the brush tool is pretty much a harsh drawing tool, and you kind of just make lines, and it's right now I'm on white, so it's going to fill in pretty hard. But I'm going to use the brackets again to decrease our cursor size. And this is one of my least favorite ways to remove blemishes because it kind of comes off finicky unless you do a bit more editing. But what I'm going to do is go to the little eyedropper tool on the right side here, and I'm going to click on a color nearby the blemish, something that I can blend with, pretty similar to the clone stamp, and I'll go back to my brush tool, and I'm going to keep the size where it is, I think, and I'm just going to dot it a little bit, because if you're too harsh, it's just not going to look realistic at all. And I'm going to go pull a slightly different tone just so it can blend a bit more. And one of the best things you can do here is make sure you hardly have any hardness on your brush, which I didn't exactly, so I just lowered it a little bit. So I'm just going to keep doing this and keep pulling from different brushes and keep pulling from different levels of hardness and colors and tones. And we're going to keep patching it until it blends well enough. And that's okay. I think I made it a little bit too bright, so I'm gonna try and darken it just a little bit. But for the most part, it blends in pretty nicely. It gets rid of that red, which is the main harsh area, especially when you're working on faces. So if I'm honest, that is my least favorite way to remove blemishes because it kind of just looks like a little sloppy, while the spot healing, clone stamp, and patch are very neat and confined ways of doing it. So for one of our last ways, this is kind of a way to remove the kind of rosiness rather than an exact blemish, like a scab or a pimple. It's more so the kind of rosiness in cheeks that kind of throw off the image. It could even be for acne, this kind of pink reddish. I think on this day my face was just especially red. It must have been windy or cold or something like that. So one of the ways we're going to go after this is we're going to go over here to the bottom section here. What you're usually going to see is this tool, and then there'll be the little arrow here, which means there's more options. So we're going to hold down on that. We see dodge tool, burn tool, and sponge tool. We're going to click on the sponge tool, and up here on this top bar where you have your settings for the tool, we're going to click saturate and this little arrow here, and we're going to highlight desaturate. And I think a flow of about 40 is okay. That's kind of just how much desaturation is going to happen with each brush stroke, or each stroke of desaturation we put on, and I think 40 is okay. It's a little bit below half, so it's not going to be too harsh, and we can undo if necessary. So basically we're just going to focus on these reds in the cheek and just go over it just a little so that we don't get too much gray going on here. And we're just going to dot around. I might need to bring my flow back up. because it's looking a little bit too faded. But it's not the worst thing. I'm going to try and bring the flow down so that we're not being too harsh to, that's a 19, which isn't too bad. So we're just going to get rid of some of this. Rid of all this red in here. One easy way to remove this type of rosiness, if the desaturate tool just isn't coming out properly for you, is to go over here to your adjustment layers. Either your adjustment layers, or you can just go to image adjustments to manually edit the picture. But just to be safe for now, we're going to go to our adjustment layers, and we're going to go to the one called selective color. So I'm going to click on that. And right now it defaults to your red section. You can go to any color and you can adjust any tint of any color, but reds is perfect for what we're doing. And what I think we're going to adjust first is the yellow slider. And it's just going to tint our reds a little bit more orange. See, if we were to go this way, it would end up being more pink and red. But we want to blend in with the skin tones as much as possible. And as long as it complements the idea for our image, we're going to bring it over to this section. So we can tint it a little bit more yellowy orange, and it will help get rid of that red. So I think what we can do is also adjust the cyan a little bit to kind of remove that red, tint it more orange. And I'm kind of liking the way this looks. It's kind of blending together a bit more. It's kind of looking more into color correction than it is retouching, but it still does work properly for this blemish removal. And I know I didn't completely remove all the blemishes from this image, but earlier when I did this was how all the blemishes and moles and such I removed in the final product. So that's how we do it, and that's how you guys can remove blemishes from your images. I chose to keep the red here. I think it's, you know, kind of part of my face. I didn't want to remove any of that because it's just a portrait of me. But if it was for like a client or something like that and you were shooting studio headshots, I think it would be really important for you to remove that kind of thing, because then they'd get upset at you and say, why didn't you remove this? So it's kind of just good to take that initiative sometimes. But I think that's all I have to go over now for you guys. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. I've worked in Photoshop for about 5 years now, so I feel like I know it pretty well, and I use it for photography almost all the time. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. If you haven't already, please subscribe. I really appreciate the support, and you subscribing would mean a lot in helping me know that you guys are enjoying my content. And this is the first type of video I've done like this, so if you guys enjoyed it, I'd love the feedback. If you give a like or a dislike if you enjoyed, or if you want me to stick with my regular content, just let me know. So that's all I have for you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.